so long since I felt your skin. It's been so long since I listened in to one of your shells and the song of your sea. Princess of the ocean, won't you come with me? Take my hand and come with me, darling, down to the shoreline. Take my hand and come.
Hello and welcome to the Nature Garden podcast with me, Carl Steinson, and the Weekending Show team from Lionheart Radio. It's a chance to take a wander down the garden path and country lane with the birds and the bees and the flowers and trees, and an opportunity to hear stories from the past and present. In this episode, if you fancy taking up gardening or restarting a garden project, from pots to plots, from veg patches to allotments, Tom is here to inspire you. It's one of our most recognisable birds, whose image is found on seaside souvenirs, and we just love them and their colours. Tom Cadwallander is joining the circus of puffins. And Ratty is back. Kelly Hollings from the Restoring Ratty project and Northumberland Wildlife Trust reports on the return of the water vole to Kielder in Northumberland. And we've got more great top tips from Tom and some jobs for the week. All coming up on the Nature Garden podcast. Tom Pattinson's been into gardening for a while now, and he's been reflecting on how it helps us in so many different ways. Here's Tom on the benefits of gardening for us all.
I've been thinking quite a lot recently about the various benefits of gardening, especially the past 4 months and confinement to home. The garden's been a blessing. What exactly is it that attracted me to it and continues to attract me to it, I guess? Well, if you think about it, say you buy a packet of seeds, anything. You open the packet, you put the contents into the palm of your hand, and you've got quite often items the size of pinhead, dust, inanimate objects. You have to do something with them to give them life. That's a big responsibility. Okay, so you give them some moisture, you give them some warmth, and eventually a little root will come out, a radical. And then a plumule, a little shoot will come out, and it's lying there, tiny, tiny seed. If you get a hand lens, you'll see the root and the shoot. What do I do next? Well, that's the equivalent of a child, a baby just been born. You have to find some food for it. It's got a home, and you have to find a suitable temporary home for that plant to allow it to grow, to develop, but you have to give it food as well. So generally we find it's got to be put in some compost, if it wasn't already sown in some compost in the tray, and that has food in it. So we grow it on, and if you can grow that inanimate object, the speck, to its full potential until it's totally mature, let's say it's a vegetable, and you put it on the plate to eat it, what a feeling of satisfaction. Creativity, that's the word I'm searching for. It's creative gardening. If I went out to the garden now, which I'm doing quite often, there are lots and lots of young growths on some plants, and I know that if I cut that young growth off or pull it off with my hand carefully, it's severed from the mother plant. If I laid it down, it will wither and die. My challenge is to encourage it to form some roots of its own. And whether I put it into a tumbler, a glass of water, or whether I put it into some gritty compost and cover it over with a cover at the top to maintain the water cycle, it will root. I can do that. We can all do that. So we're being creative again. and that sense of achievement, the satisfaction that comes from it. That's why I love gardening. Physicality. We were told we had to exercise during the lockdown. Well, I've been exercising. I've been reaching up, stretching my arms to reach the vine overhead, to remove the side shoots, which I can't leave on. I've been down on my hands and knees, planting, hand weeding. I've been bending. I've been digging with using my arms, getting the blood pumping. I've been trimming the hedge even with the arms. And my gosh, that's physical work, all right. I've been getting my exercise in spades, literally in spades. There's a calming effect comes with gardening, apart from that sense of achievement. And it's good mentally for me. It's good mentally for lots of people throughout the world. And it's therapeutic. And you know, these gardening programs recently, they've been doing so much to attract people into gardening. That homely little program of Alan Titchmarsh's, where he's showing you not great technical things, but which are fine in their place, but how to grow just a taste of strawberries in a pot outdoors, how to sow a little row of radishes and lettuce and tend them and eat them at the end of the story. That's the basics. That's where we start. But the world's your oyster as far as gardening is concerned. It is so open to all. And you know, you don't need a garden. You don't need a massive allotment. You just need one or two little tubs or a container of some sort. And if you live in a flat and you have a single potted plant and you tend it each day and you look after it when it's poorly, you feed it, you water it, and it pleases you, believe it or not, you can be called a gardener because you're showing an interest in plants and you are caring for them. Plants become part of your life. Believe me, I know.
The water vole is well known to many of us as Ratty in the classic children's tale The Wind in the Willows, but it's not a rat, it's a water vole, and they've had a very difficult time in recent years. It's a species that excavates extensive burrow systems into the banks of waterways where they sleep and nest with an escape pod underwater. Well, they also weave nests of reeds and sedges in marshy areas. The Restoring Ratty project at Kielder is helping water voles to thrive. Led by Kelly Hollings and Graham Holyoke, staff and volunteers have been putting voles in places that were textbook perfect for voles. But actually at Kielder they've also changed the method with excellent results. Last week the latest batch of 140 water voles headed back from Devon to the waterways of Kielder. Here's Kelly Hollings to tell us more about the Restoring Ratty project.
Hello, my name is Kelly Hollings. I'm one of the project officers for Restoring Ratty. Restoring Ratty is a collaborative project based in Northumberland between Northumberland Wildlife Trust, Forestry England and Tyne Rivers Trust. All three partners work very well together to reintroduce water voles back into Kielder Forest. Kielder Forest is based in Northumberland, just below the Scottish border. Water voles were present in this area up to as little as 20 years ago, but were made extinct by the North American mink. So we know the habitat is great for them and we've chosen this area to release them. We're completely funded by the National Lottery Heritage Fund, for which we're extremely grateful. And we are very grateful to lots of local charities and funders as well who have helped us reach our match funding. So far we've released 1,629 water voles. In order to do this we had to trap water voles from highly populated areas such as the North Pennines, North York Moors, in the Trossachs in Scotland. And these juveniles were sent down to Derek Gow's breeding centre and paired up in the spring, and we released the offspring back into Kielder. We've just finished another release in June. 140 water voles were released, and we are planning our next release in August in 2020. We've learned an awful lot since the project began, mainly what water voles do and don't like in Kielder. We used to release water voles onto fast-flowing rivers and ponds, and we don't anymore. What they really prefer is very small burns. with lots of vegetation, probably because they're entering a habitat where there is no burrows for them, and they like to hide in the vegetation and have it ready for them. Our main aim is to create a sustainable population of water voles in Kielder. Like I said, we've released 1,629 so far, and another ambitious aim would be to link our population with the donor population in the North Pennines, which is about 50 miles as the crow flies. So we're a 5-year project. We've just entered year 5. We started in 2016 and we end next summer, and it's been an amazing journey. Thank you for listening.
Tom Pattinson is on a mission to inspire us to not dilly-dally and put it off, but to get on and try it. Yes, he wants to get us all gardening. And you know what? It's so easy to start. Anyone can do it, and it's open to all, from planting a small pot to taking on a large plot. Over to you, Tom.
If recent events have convinced you you'd like to try growing your food plants, then go for it. You can get in at any level you wish, just as a hobby, a pursuit, and you'll find it very satisfying. At the top end of the scale, it's probably lots of people's dreams to have an allotment space where they can call their own and they grow fruit, vegetables fresh for the family, for themselves, lots of ornamental flowers, a place to relax away from the strains and stresses of everyday life. You can escape there and just really enjoy yourself. It's a dream. Lots of people are trying throughout the country to get onto an allotment. Allotment Holders Association keep reporting more people than allotments available. So generally, this is the way it ends up. You go to a local allotment society and you say to them, any allotment spare? Yes, that one, if you care to do something with it. And you generally find you've got one or you're offered one that is riddled with perennial weeds. That's why no one else has taken it on. Not for the faint-hearted, but good for you if you do take it on, clean it and get crops growing there. Superb. There's a simpler way, and I know quite a few people who've done this and continue to do it. They go to an allotment society, say, is anyone feeling they can't cope with a full allotment? Would they like to share with me? Or put a notice in the local village shop or something of that nature. It happens, and you sometimes find someone will share an allotment space with you. Even in your locality, there might be someone who has a large garden, they've grown vegetables themselves before, they're no longer up to doing it, they'll allow you to grow some fruit veg on their plot, in their garden, if you give them a little share of the proceeds, the crop, fine. Simple way of getting into gardening, as I mentioned earlier, is growing a few pot plants. Probably the best option is, if you haven't got a full garden around you, go for container growing. That can be large pots, it can be tubs, it can be raised beds. If you have some spare timber, pieces of wood lying around, all you need to do is make a square or an oblong shape, 4 pieces of timber, something for the top. Of course, you can buy ready-made containers and grow vegetables in there, grow fruit as well if you wish. It's up to you. Fruit trees aren't a bad option because in recent years, well, the last decade anyway, they've got dwarf varieties of top fruits, apples and so on. And once you've got them going, for the initial outlay, it's really worthwhile. You get crops year on year. They don't take an awful lot of looking after, as long as you're watering them most of the time and you're feeding them during the growing season. And here's the thing. If you're growing something in a container, it might just be an ornamental display for summer bedding plants, then it's going to dry out the container simply because any roots growing in there have not got a free run as they would have in the open garden. In the open garden, they send deep roots out into the soil, searching for extra moisture and food. They're confined in a container, a pot, a tub, etc. So you must make sure that the material in there they're growing in, the compost, let's say, it is tough, it's bulky, it can hold moisture. So, say a peat-based compost, and peat is still available, dries out so quickly. So I generally go for organic matter in the bottom of well-rotted organic matter in the pot, and a soil-based compost if possible, because it's bulky, it doesn't dry out as quickly. That's a hint for that. If you're going to grow plants such as those, vegetables, brilliant choice, so quick to respond. Salad crops, I keep mentioning salad crops, but within a couple of weeks of sowing, you can pick leaf lettuce and radishes, and so it goes on. You can buy seeds, you can sow seeds, but there's a simpler way. There are a vast range of plug plants available out there. Young plants raised in little trays, and you put them in. It gives you a flying start. You haven't got to wait for germination to tolerate failed germinations because the soil's too dry, and so on. You put a little plant in you bought from the garden centre, or you put, say, half a dozen or 12 plants in, and there's immediate growth there and success at the end of it. There are so many options for you for gardening. Here's the thing. Remember, there'll be lots of generous advice around, because gardeners are helpful in this way. If you see you're growing something, they'll say, oh, by the way, don't forget to thin out and so on, and thin out the crop so it's not too many in there. Listen to all advice. Accept some of it, but if you find a way to grow a crop, a plant even, stick with it. It's successful for you, because a single plant, there are so many directions, routes to success with growing it, different methods, and they all arrive at the same conclusion, a healthy plant. Trust yourself and get onto it.
They are as cute as a button and as tough as they come. Behind the cuddly toy image is a bird of incredible fortitude and bravery, and soon the circus will be leaving town. Or should I say, the Farne Islands. Tom Cadwallander from the British Trust for Ornithology can tell us more about our very own sea parrot, the wonderful puffin.
Here we are, Carl. It's the middle of July, and for some bird species, it's actually the end of the breeding season. It's finished, gone. So they've raised their young. The species I'm thinking of is puffin. Puffin is a species which is familiar, I suspect, with almost everyone because of its kind of iconic nature. It's a little black and white bird. It's about 8 inches tall and has red legs. And it has this most colourful bill, and it's a sand eel eater, but it has this real colourful bill, stripes of yellow, orange, and a little bit of blue mixed in there, and it's really quite something. But it has this big white or off-white cheek patches, and they really stand out. And it has this little eye sort of marking there, which adds perhaps a little bit of poignancy because it looks a bit like a tear to some. But they are incredibly robust, these little birds. They nest in burrows. They'll actually excavate a burrow just like a rabbit burrow, and they'll lay their eggs in there. They'll have perhaps one chick, possibly two, but generally just one, and they'll collect fish for it whilst it grows. And just now, all these puffins and the pufflings, as they're now called, the young birds of the air, are all gathering in great rafts off the offshore islands. In Northumberland, they breed on Coquet Island, and they'll breed on the Farne Islands, and just north of us in the Isle of May, they'll breed as well. And arguably, they're the most numerous breeding bird species in Northumberland. And, they're quite difficult to survey because they nest in burrows. And so there's a really big survey every 5 years, and with sampling surveys on the years in between. And we reckon somewhere between 25,000 birds are on Coquet, 40,000 birds on the Farne Islands. So you can see that they're kind of easily getting up to being the most numerous breeding bird in the county of Northumberland. Fantastic, really, when you think about it. But it's incredible, really. But they have this amazing lifestyle. And it's really quite intense during the breeding season for them, because they'll come ashore sort of end of March, April time, and they'll start to pair, and they'll be gone by end of July, early August. So they have this kind of 4 months ashore where they're actively raising their young. And they're not particularly good flyers. They have really quite stumpy wings, but if you see them underwater, they're quite amazing. They almost fly underwater. They're like penguins in a sense. But they will fly to feed out to the area of the Farne Deeps, which I've mentioned before, with other species. And this is the kind of the powerhouse of all food in seabird food in the North Sea. And they'll gather up sand eels. And we've all seen the photographs of them having sort of 8-10 sand eels in their bills, and they're able to be able to do this by almost kind of slightly dejointing their bill, and they'll sort of layer them in their bill, and the bills have little serrations, so it keeps the sand eels in place. But they'll fly back to the breeding colony from the Farne Deeps, which is something like 40 kilometres offshore of the Northumberland coast, and to feed their young. But it's not all as easy as it sounds. They have to run the gauntlet of the large gulls which are standing in wait of them to come back, and the gulls will try to get these adults to disgorge their food so they can eat it, really. And sometimes the large gulls, if the young ones are not sort of careful, the large gulls will actually take a young puffin and gobble it up without a problem, and a lot of birds will die that way. But they're quite numerous. But the population suffers a bit from the climate change, because their prey is their main food source is sand eels. And sand eels are cold water species, but as the temperature of the sea rises, the sand eels will sort of retreat further north, and the puffins will retreat further north. And puffins are incredibly numerous in the Arctic. Tens of thousands, millions even, on the huge cliffs of the Faroes and the Spitsbergen and areas of the far north. Incredible, really. But it's that sort of heritage that comes to mind, and they're just now, as I've mentioned, they're gathering in their large rafts, and soon they'll be off. And we reckon we must have lost about a third of the population already on Coquet. A third of them have gone out to sea, and that's what happens. They will go out to sea to spend the rest of the year. So the first part of their autumn, through into sort of early January, early parts of the new year, will be spent either in the North Sea or well into the Atlantic Ocean. Can you imagine spending your time? That's your choice, spending your time out there. And during that time, they will go through a full wing mold, so they are flightless, as well as being sort of stuck out into this hardened, really quite arduous place. They'll be flightless while they're out there. But anyway, just as their sort of flight feathers come back in, they'll gradually make their way back into the North Sea, and coming back down into into the inshore waters near their breeding areas, ready to come ashore during for the breeding season in early April. But this is kind of 8 months spent out at sea on just in the most inhospitable conditions ever. So these birds are really hardened seabirds. That even though they have this supposed kind of comical look about them in the breeding season, that can hardly walk on land, or they're not very good on land, and they have this colourful bill, which, by the way, they lose largely during the winter time. The colourful plates are dropped off the side of the bill. So they are a different looking bird altogether during the winter time. But yes, a period of change, and our puffin are the iconic species, the puffin the bird that people want to come and see in Northumberland is about to go out into the North Sea, for goodness sake. You can't believe it. But anyway, that's the life they have. My goodness me, what a toughie.
This is the Nature Garden Podcast.
I think it's time for some jobs in the week in the garden. So, over to you, Tom. I think you might be starting off with some hoovering there. Is that right, Tom?
Here are some of the jobs I'm going to be busy with in the coming week. They might ring a bell with you. Lawns, I'm cutting them weekly at the moment. Problem is, they're growing so fast, and there are showers just out of nowhere, and if you try to cut the grass when it's wet, it just chews it up. It doesn't give you a good clean cut at all. So I'm taking every opportunity, rather than be thwarted by the grass and waiting 10 days, a fortnight. You've just got to, there's far too much mowing. You've got to go over it twice if you miss the opportunity. So weekly cutting for me. Hedges. We have a 1/4 acre garden. It's surrounded by hedges, hawthorn, privet, beech, separate parts of the garden, and they need cutting. The hawthorn and the privet twice in the year. The beech, I can get away with 1 cut, but I generally do 2. And of course, these are the first cuts because we've left it until into July to let the birds get their broods through, 1, 2, 3 broods, however many they've had. It's safe to cut now. So all the gear I'm putting on, my eye shields, something on my head, gloves of course, and if it's electric or whether it's petrol driven, for goodness sake, take care with the cable. Always know where the cable is. It's generally under my arm, round the back of my neck, and that's the electric cable, and I always use the current circuit breaker, which they're not too expensive to buy. Plug that in, plug your appliance into that, and you're safe if you cut the cable or there's any fault in the line. I'm also removing the lower leaves of tomatoes. I did mention this a couple of weeks ago, but I held off, but now I'm going to start doing it. The reason is I can't see the pots. I can't see the base of the tomato. It's so dense at the bottom. And some of the older leaves on the tomato plants are starting to go yellow. That's a natural process. They need removing. But if I take too many off, I'm going to have a problem with greenback. That's the fruit of the plant. The shoulder of the fruit stays green and the rest of it can ripen. And that's generally one of the reasons why that happens is you've taken far too much foliage off at one time, too many leaves. Don't do that. There's another reason why it happens, and that's because it gets extremely hot in the greenhouse. So if you get greenback, it's either because you've taken too many leaves off. If that is not the case, then consider shading the greenhouse a wee bit. The plants develop greenback in intense heat and sunlight. That's out of the way. I'll take 2 or 3, and then I'll get a good run of air through them, circulating, avoid any disease of any kind. That's something I'm going to do this coming week. I've been potting up rooted cuttings all the time, all these freebies going on the plants outside in the garden, but there's a price to pay for rooting them up. Once they've rooted, you have to find a home for them in pots. And initially, at least for the first couple of weeks, whether they're outdoor plants or indoors, you've got to find space in the greenhouse. And I'm a little bit short of space at the moment, but I have to pot those up. They can't stand too long with roots in a medium which is gritty, for rooting cuttings in, but hasn't got food in. So I got those potted up, then some will go into the conservatory temporary, I guess. I'm watering the outdoor containers. I mentioned this before. It's a must. I check them each day, whether they're tubs, hanging baskets, etc. Make sure they don't dry out. It's such a waste if they do, because plants rarely recover. And once plants have been dried out, some might recover, but it undermines their health, and they can't fight off pests and diseases as easily as they otherwise would. I'm looking out at the fruit and vegetables at the moment, and I've got to keep reminding myself and others, don't waste those fruits and vegetables. We've been making jam, at least Judy's been making jam recently with the strawberries. 1 shower of rain and they're spoiled, or a decent shower of rain that is, so we're picking those daily at the moment as well. If you didn't get all the benches done I know it's a winter job, some people say, any timber, seats and things outside. If you didn't get them done then, then if you have a minute to spare, and this is the busiest of times, then you can get onto those. I confess I have a bench that I did not get sanded down or painted or preserved, and by the way, I've just about preserved the wood on the greenhouse. I have a timber greenhouse, an Alton red cedar wood, and I've just been going over that with what we both have with preservative, and it's looking better, and it's a good feeling to know that that will keep the greenhouse going for a year or two longer. Enjoy your week's gardening, folks.
You've been listening to the Nature Garden podcast with me, Carl Steinson, gardener Tom Pattinson, birder Tom Cadwallander, and Kelly Hollings from the Restoring Ratty project and Northumberland Wildlife Trust. Thanks for your time, and please do join us again soon. Bye for now.